Rarely a month goes by that some leader doesn't come to me frustrated about his or her name of their church, their business, their nonprofit, their ministry, their cause. Names can be very problematic. Now, if you have a great name, it can open up doors that you can't believe. People respond to names. Remember, we live in an 8-second world. People are deciding what they think in between 4 and 8 seconds generally. So in that world, names become really, really important. So today, we want to talk about when it's time to change your name. And trust me, everybody needs to listen to this. In fact, you probably should send this out and share it with people, because so many people today are sitting there thinking, man, I'm not crazy about our church's name or our business's name or our nonprofit's name. Today, we're going to find out some answers. All right, before we start talking about changing your organization's name, let me read you some interesting things. Google was originally called Backrub. Did you know that? Google was originally called Backrub. Best Buy began as The Sound of Music. You know the movie? They were called Sound of Music. Sony, this is interesting, Sony was originally Tokyo Toshunin Kogyo. Tokyo Toshunin Kogyo. That was originally Sony's name. Nike started out as Blue Ribbon Sports. I don't think anybody would disagree that the name changes they made were good. Nike was Blue Ribbon Sports. Think about that. So a lot of companies get to a point where they think maybe it's time to change our name. And I want to talk about today when that happens, what you need to be thinking about. Because first of all, let me start with a term we call brand equity. Brand equity, for those of you that don't know what that means, brand equity simply means there's so much goodwill, so much good feeling, so much credibility and trust built in a name that it's not worth changing. Even if it's a crazy name, or even if it's a name that has no real meaning anymore or doesn't resonate with people. But in many cases, so many people know it. So many people feel good about it. A great example would be the Billy Graham Evangelistic Organization. I would never recommend they change their name, because Billy Graham has done such a brilliant job over the last number of decades, creating such a good feeling, such credibility, such trust in who he is and what he stands for. In fact, the great thing about brand equity, if you will, that kind of trust and credibility in a great name, is that even when a scandal happens, you can weather it more easily because of that trust and credibility that you've built up in that name. Billy Graham is a great example. They could have a scandal of some kind at his ministry today, but because of his name and the trust that's connected with that name, they could weather it fairly easily. And so I think brand equity really does matter. And in many cases, Joel Osteen's church is Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas. Lakewood Church was a housing development. It was in the north side of Houston. And Lakewood is long gone from there. They've moved to downtown Houston. They're not involved in that section anymore, but they've not changed the name because so many people know the name Lakewood. So many people have good a feeling about it. So many people go there. So many people in the Houston area trust that name that they're not about to change that and walk away with something else. So it's brand equity. No matter who you are, whether it's a secular company, a church, or a ministry, a nonprofit, brand equity does matter. So I always start there. Whenever a client in our company, Cooke Media Group, when a client calls us in to work on a name process, we've created a name change process that we walk organizations through. And if you're interested in that, you can reach out at our website at cookemediagroup.com and talk to us about it, because we've done some real research into how to do it most effectively. And we've discovered that the first place we want to start is brand equity. If you have that kind of credibility, even though you may not like the name, or it may not resonate like it used to, or it may not be appropriate like it used to, it still might be worth keeping simply because so many people know it, so many people trust it, and so many people feel good about it. But there are times when you should change. That's what I want to talk about today. When do we want to change our name, or at least consider it? Number one, it's worth considering changing your organization's name when the mission changes. I have a friend that started a ministry, a Christian ministry years ago, taking American physicians on short-term mission trips to third world countries. So they would go to Africa, say, and they would take doctors. It was great work. They would take American doctors to go for 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks at a time to work. Well, after a while, they realized, that got really expensive. It was difficult to pull doctors away for that long. And so they shifted to using local doctors. So say in Kenya, say in Uganda, they would find local physicians there who could do this all the time and start resourcing them, supporting them financially, getting them more equipment they needed, and helping them be the doctor. So because their mission shifted dramatically from bringing American doctors over to helping support and find and resource local doctors, they decided to change the name of their organization. Another good example is our team, Cooke Pictures. We've been Cooke Pictures since 1991. My wife Kathleen and I founded the company in 1991. That's more than 25 years we've been operating as Cooke Pictures. But in those days, we largely were producers. We were media producers. In those days, equipment was expensive. Most churches and nonprofit organizations, even businesses, couldn't afford to buy it. So we would go in, we would rent gear, or we had our own, and we would produce television specials, documentaries, films of all kinds, commercials, advertising campaigns for clients. In Cooke Pictures, we named it after the old studio names from Hollywood. But over the years, we started expanding into digital media, website design, growth strategies, communication strategies, even book publishing, print book publishing. And after all those expansion areas, we realized that Cooke Pictures really doesn't capture what we do anymore. So we changed the name from Cooke Pictures to Cooke Media Group because it kind of embraces everything we do to help clients get their message heard, get it focused, and get that message out to more and more people. So it was time to change our name. So make a note that when your mission changes, that means it may be time to shift and change the name as well. The second thing is when you expand or contract. Very often, sometimes an organization grows, and like we did, offers other services or products, expands into new markets, and in other ways, organization can shrink, and they don't necessarily shrink in a bad way. Sometimes they decide to focus. I know many organizations that started big, but after a while realized our niche really should be this, and so they narrowed their focus like a laser, and they started doing things differently. So they expanded, they contract, and when that happens, it may be time to change your name because it doesn't always reflect what you're doing now. You need to have a name that reflects what you're doing at the moment. And expanding or contracting could be a trigger for you to maybe think about changing the name. The third time to change your name is when your name is actually hurting your business. From a secular perspective, you might remember Philip Morris, the tobacco industry giant. They had such bad publicity back in the 80s and the 90s that they changed their name to Altria in 2001. That completely left their name in the dust, and they were shifting they were also getting involved in other products, other consumer items, and so they wanted to move away from the negative publicity the tobacco industry had and the name Philip Morris kind of carried. And they shifted their name just to walk away from that. I've often seen ministry organizations and nonprofit organizations whose founder might come under some real scrutiny, maybe financial scrutiny, maybe being arrested for something, maybe have a moral failure. In those kind of cases, if the organization is built or named after the founder, it might be time to change the name of the organization. So always think in terms of if your name is actually hurting your business. And that can be from a moral point of view. It may be the founder whose the ministry is named after or the organization is named after he falls. Maybe it's time to change the name. But it also could be just cultural shifts happening out there when things happen, like the tobacco industry. And there are other kind of cultural shifts that happen. Sometimes names simply lose their meaning, and it's time to shift. Changing a name can really change and improve the perception of your organization. Number 4, when there's a major shift in technology or culture and your name simply becomes outdated. Most people don't know that UPS was originally the American Messenger Company. They started out as the American Messenger Company, but technology being what it is and culture changing and the company growing the way it did, they needed to shift their name, so they became the United Parcel Service and eventually shortened that to UPS today. So if technology sometimes can change the way you do business, sometimes a organization that's driven by buses or by trucks shifts to being driven by airplanes, and we need to maybe shift the focus of what we're doing there. So technology really has a way of shifting. Culture is the same way. In the church world, I think of names like Third Presbyterian. I've seen a Fourth Presbyterian church. Now, I'm sure that has a lot of history and, a lot of tradition to it, a lot of legacy. But the truth is, Fourth Presbyterian Church does not resonate with the culture much today. And it may be time to think about shifting that name. Doesn't mean it's a bad name. Doesn't mean it, that you've done anything wrong. But culture has shifted, and we're living in a world today where people aren't as familiar with denominations, for one. They're not as familiar with the way denominations are structured. Why we need a Second Presbyterian or a Third Baptist or a Fourth Methodist Church. Why we need these things. People don't get it. So that kind of situation, it might be time to think about how your name change could reinvigorate your entire organization. Number 5, it could be time to change your organization when your name doesn't translate internationally. We live in a global world today. We live in a global world. So you have to, when you think of a name, you have to think of it, how could this work overseas? You may be a ministry or a nonprofit that's doing mission outreaches overseas. You may be a business that wants to sell products overseas or open an overseas office. Maybe you need to think in terms of how your name works internationally. The great example, of course, the iconic example is when Chevrolet moved into Spain and started selling the Nova. The Nova used to be one of the most popular Chevrolets on the road, but it tanked. They couldn't sell anything in Spain until one marketing executive finally realized Nova means no-go in Spanish. And so nobody wants to buy a car who's named No-Go. And they changed the name of Nova, and guess what? Their sales took off. So international names are a really big deal, and there are companies that specialize in helping you come up with those kind of names, but that's a process that we go through as well. So international, as we do live streaming today, as we do social media, as we do some of these other media projects and short videos, we need to really think that we're getting more and more international audience. A church of 50 people in Des Moines, Iowa today could have an international platform through live streaming, through social media, through the web, through short videos. So we need to think of, will our name work? Will it translate when we go to other countries? Number 6 is pretty simple, but it's so true today, and that is if you can't get the URL, if you can't get the website address. I would have not gone from Cooke Pictures to Cooke Media Group had we not been able to get CookeMediaGroup.com. We really wanted to get that. Otherwise, what's the point? Now, in some cases, it's impossible. Honestly, we live in a world where so many great names have been taken, and you're not going to be able to get a lot of good names online, but you should be able to get a variation of it or something really, really close. And even if you're a nonprofit, by the way, the designation ORG was designed for nonprofits, churches, ministry organizations, but I still say get the .com as well. People just default to .com. But URLs really, really do matter. If you haven't been able to get to secure the URL for your name pretty accurately, you might want to consider changing a name. And of course, that's particularly true if you have a legacy organization that's been named for the last 100 years. If you are a Fourth Presbyterian Church, and I'm not ragging on Fourth Presbyterian churches, but you'll know that if you can't get those kind of names, maybe it's time to rethink your company or organization's name. Number 7, remember that shorter and simpler is always better. Shorter and simpler is always better. If you can shorten your name, just think, people remembering it, people using it on social media, email, the web, all those kind of things, shorter is better. A great example, I wrote it down because I wanted to be able to share it accurately. Probably the best example is when Pete Marwick International, the company Pete Marwick International, merged with a German company Kleinveld Main Gordeler. So they could have become Pete Marwick Kleinveld Main Gordeler. Now, how's that for a name? And you're never going to find the web address for that, trust me. But they changed the name to KPMG. Actually, it was KPMG Consulting, but even they shortened that to Bearing Point. Bearing Point. And I think they made a great choice. They evolved from an incredibly long potential name to a short name and then an even shorter name, something that was easy for people to remember. Now, you may say Bearing Point has no great bearing on what they do, but they can justify it. They have they feel like it reflects accurately what they're doing, and it makes for a shorter and simpler name. Maybe a church like Elevation a church like Grace, a church, that you can just knock off the name like that. It's really important. Always think short. I've seen churches that were the Holy Ghost Deliverance Center of Cleveland Church International. I mean, half their letterhead was their church name. That's never going to work. Always think in terms of short names. So those 7 things, when the mission's changed, when the name, let's review real quick. 7 things: when the mission is changed, when you expand or contract, when your current name hurts your business through a moral failure or just a cultural shift, when there's a major shift in technology or your purpose becomes outdated, you've shifted so much in what you do. Number 5, when your name doesn't translate internationally, when you can't get the URL. Number 6. Number 7, always remember shorter and simpler is almost always better. This is really important to me because, like I say, we just shifted from years and years, decades of being Cooke Pictures to being Cooke Media Group. And you know what? We've gotten such a positive response from the new name. People are congratulating us because they feel like they get now what we do better. They understand it. We redid the website. We've redone the logo design. Everything has shifted for us, and it's given us a real shot in the arm. And let me just say that. Don't discount what a new name can do for you when it comes to just being a bolt of goodness, just a shot in the arm. Sometimes a new name reinvigorates an organization, and it's a really positive thing. So if you're going through that, if you're struggling with it, reach out to us, cookemediagroup.com. We're happy to talk to you about it. We have a plan for walking people through the steps of those kind of organizational changes, whether it's a church or a ministry, nonprofit, whatever. We can help you figure out what name is most effective, because today, as I said, living in an 8-second world, the name is pretty much what most people will give you. If most people will not get past the name. If the name doesn't resonate, if it doesn't click, if they don't like it, if they don't understand it, they're not going to go further. They're going to move on. So now more than ever, names absolutely do matter. So put a lot of thought into, and by the way, this is for leaders especially who have this nagging sense of, oh man, something's strange about my name. I don't feel comfortable with it. Our organization's name, maybe it's time to change. Go through these points, and if it does hit you, if it resonates, give us a call, because we'd love to help you walk through that. And by the way, a good resource for helping us is my book, Unique: Telling Your Story in the Age of Brands and Social Media. I'd encourage you to get this. This will help you walk through the process of getting your brand out there in a more positive, powerful, and compelling way. I wrote this book specifically for churches, nonprofit organizations, causes, ministry organizations, mission outreaches. Help you figure out, what is the story we need to tell, why do we need to tell it, and how should we be telling that story? This should be a manual on the desk of every leader of every church, nonprofit, every ministry in America. So if you're listening to this, buy a copy for your pastor, buy a copy for your boss. This would be a great gift for people who need to understand the power of effective communication. I'm Phil Cooke. Thanks for tuning in. Remember, share these. It really means a lot to us that you listen. It means even more that you're willing to share it. You know people out there that are struggling with these kind of questions. So please, please, please go out there and talk it up. Give us a great review, and that will help us move up. It'll help more people see it, and it'll make a big difference. Come see me on my blog at philcooke.com, PhilCooke, because we're talking about these very issues there. I'd love to see and hear your comments, and we can have a conversation about these subjects there. Thanks so much.